Well, shooters and reloaders, it's Fortune Cookie 45LC coming to you from the Hot Lead Zone with a book report. And I got these two books from sportsmansvintagepress.com, and I'd like to introduce you to P.O. Ackley. And he's the one that wrote this book in 1962, and how appropriate. It says Handbook for Shooters and Reloaders. So shooters and reloaders, like you to meet P.O. Ackley. That's Parker Otto Ackley. Now you might not have heard of him because he goes back quite a ways. Turns out that both he and Elmer Keith are contemporaries. So P.O. Ackley died in the year 1989 at the age of 86. And Elmer Keith died in the year 1984, as I recall, at the age of 85. So they're both very similar. Authors, well written, and they did a lot of work in the field of firearms. And both are still major figures today because their work lives on in legacy. Well, I'd like to dedicate this video to all our friends in Wisconsin and also the great Northeast, because you're going through a real bad cold spell. So I'm raising a cup of hot cappuccino to all of you. Stay warm. Now it's interesting because P.O. Ackley and Elmer Keith, even though they knew and respected each other, they often tossed jibes and barbs back and forth at each other, because P.O. Ackley was really into high velocity, and a lot of his work involved taking cartridge cases of either standard or Wildcat cartridges at the time, and what he would do would be to improve the cartridges by decreasing the body taper and then either moving or making the shoulders sharper, allowing more powder to be burned in the particular caliber. So for instance, he would call his cartridges the Ackley Improved, such as here. This is the 270 Winchester Improved Ackley. And you see how the case has been straightened out and the shoulder has been sharpened to allow more powder to be burned and raise the performance of the 270 Winchester. Now P.O. Ackley was really big into the smaller calibers being driven at very high velocity, and he proposed using bullets that would hold together and at the high velocity hold together and not blow up, and yet when the velocity dropped, the bullets would still penetrate and expand and have good killing power. So hunting with the smaller calibers at high velocity, that was what P.O. Ackley was all about. And if you look at some of the cartridges of today, the short magnums with the straight side walls and the short stubby case and the real sharp shoulders, that came straight from Ackley. Now, he also pioneered the development of 17 caliber rounds and was the first one actually to produce a 17 caliber centerfire. So the small bores had tremendous performance over and above what a lot of people expected or suspected back in those days. And P.O. Ackley was a forerunner of even the military going to the 223, later on going to the smaller bore, not losing performance and still having the effectiveness they wanted. Even the 20 caliber 204 size was pioneered by Ackley, and that was resurrected many years later with the 204 Ruger. Now this book is very interesting because it talks about loading dies and even some of the hand tools, the hand dies. Talks about barrels and the quality of barrel steel and the concepts of sectional density, bore capacity, head space, pressure, and this handbook for shooters and reloaders by Parker O. Ackley is a great addition to the library that you might have. Now, some of the jibes that they toss back and forth, in spite of the respect they had for one another, look at Elmer Keith mentions the needle blower fens, the small bore high velocity. He called them the needle blowers, and how they were totally ineffective for use against big game because you couldn't shoot raking angles with them. And then P.O. Ackley talked about the fans of the heavy bullet slow velocity group and the popular term of raking angles. So that was a jibe to Elmer Keith. This book by P.O. Ackley is a very substantial work, and in fact, after he gets through with all the articles, he has a section here where he breaks down every cartridge of the day and the loading data for those cartridges. So it mentions the powders and the performance, the particulars about the various rounds, and then there's a section that goes from the aspect of powders, how you have powders here from various powders and how they can be used in all the various calibers. So this kind of foresaw some of the reloading manuals that we have today, organized the same way. So once again, sportsmansvintagepress.com, great sources for books like this, and I added these to my library. You can see I'm right in the middle of reading this.